all enjoyed your lunch. I know I did. I'm Zainab Badawi, and I am moderating this conversation, Evolving Investor Perceptions, as part of the Global Business Forum, looking at the challenges, the opportunities, and so on when we're talking about investment in Africa. And I have a superstar sitting on my left here from the world of finance, the co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Blackstone, and you celebrate 30 years next year since your founding. Congratulations for that birthday coming up. I'd like to be 30 again myself. And of course, Blackstone is well known as one of the world's leading financial advisory service firms, as well as an investor. It has about $300 billion to manage worldwide. It's the biggest in the US, isn't it? And it's known for its M&A activities, but it's also very active in the energy and infrastructure sector. And in particular, Steve Schwarzman, you have had this very eye-catching initiative. You've been part of a tripartite alliance with the investment arm of the Aga Khan's Economic Development Corporation, and also with the government of Uganda and one of your portfolio companies, Scythe, to build the Bujagali hydroelectric power plant in Uganda. It costs about $900 million to build. It provides 49% of Uganda's electricity, doubling the energy supply for that country. And it's the biggest power plant of its kind on the continent of Africa. Huge, huge thing, seen as a success story. How far do you think that kind of big-scale model and public-private partnership can serve as an investment model for other parts of Africa?
Well, thank you very much, and it's nice to see everybody here today and be in Dubai. In answer to that question, Africa has, as you know, sub-Saharan Africa has almost an insatiable need for energy and power. In fact, to those of us who don't live there, it's actually shocking that approximately 70% of the people don't have electricity. It's really unimaginable. And the idea that this part of Africa can grow at sort of a 6% rate or a little more with constant interruptions, high cost electricity is a testament to the rapid growth and the creativity of people. But what you see is when you provide electricity, which people in the developed world regard as just sort of their right, that the growth rates increase very materially, which means more people can work, more people can get paid, and quality of life goes up. So I'm a real believer that there are many, many opportunities, and I guess in your first panel, Aliko Dangote was here discussing the partnership that we have to build a lot more power. So there's all kinds of different power that can be developed in Africa, but what's important is that it has to be done. This is not an elective course.
It sounds like the social impact of the Bujagali Dam in particular makes me wonder how important, as a big investor, high returns are versus social impact.
I think it's important to have both, particularly if you're operating in an area where people are really suffering just because they don't have basic infrastructure. You can't get investment, you can't attract investment without a good return. It just doesn't show up. You can encourage it, you can root for it, you can take one or two groups of people and ask them to do something that's not normal, but that's not the way you basically drive change. You have to provide an attractive return, but the advantage of doing something in an area where people really benefit is a good thing, particularly if you get an equivalent type of return.
I think everybody understands that investors, obviously, it's not just an altruistic exercise. You clearly have to have something in return. But the question is, what's the time frame? Because often you hear people on the continent of Africa saying, yes, we want foreign investors to come in, but they're often typically looking for a return after 5 years, after 10 years even. And what they often want is medium and long-term investment, particularly when you come to energy and infrastructural projects where you've got to have a much longer lead time.
Well, if you want to have a lead time of longer than 10 years, that's not an easy thing to attract capital for. The faster people can see a return, the more enthusiastic they are putting money to work. And part of it is good planning. A part of it is having a template for attracting people. All infrastructure takes time. Often, the first group of people who attempt to do something run into financial trouble. And sometimes it's actually easier to be the successor to that first group because they've already done a lot of the work. So the way we look at things, 5 years is fine. 10 years is really a stretch. Longer than that, you need to attract a different type of capital than we have. There isn't enormous patience for projects that take 20 years. And there are specialty development banks that do that. The problem isn't so much getting that debt from those specialty institutions. It's really getting equity, in terms of how long are you prepared to wait.
But because you do need that longer time frame in many cases in Africa, is it then a future model will be the private investors looking for quicker returns, perhaps coming in with investment from as is the case now with Africa, a lot of the investment coming from European development institutions? That's something which you see as remaining as we go forward.
You have to separate debt from equity. There are a lot of development banks that are set up to provide that kind of long-term capital. But people who are looking for returns on equity don't always have the same level of time frame. So I think development happens all over the world. Electric plants are built all over the world. We've built $25 billion of greenfield plants ourselves, just at Blackstone, and it's only one of our many businesses. Mm-hmm. So it's clear you can get this right all over the world.
This morning I was talking to Aliko Dangote, richest man in Africa, of course, and I know that Blackstone has just embarked on a joint venture on infrastructure,
right,
not only in Nigeria, but across the countries, the 14, 15 countries that Dangote Group deal with. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about that particular alliance?
Well, for those of you who missed Aliko, and that was a bad idea because he's a smart guy and he always has something informative to say. Basically what we've done is form a venture with $5 billion in it, half from Dangote and half from Blackstone. And what we're going to be doing is a variety of electric plants, pipelines, and transmission lines to help facilitate the development and distribution of power. We think this is very consistent with what we've done in other places in the world. We've done 2 major projects in Africa already, the Bujagladi Dam, and we also discovered oil offshore in Ghana, which was the first oil that they had. So at the moment, we've gone 2 for 2 in Africa with very large amounts of capital. So we have a favorable impression. And as we looked at taking a broader role in Africa, one thing is for sure. When you're from out of town, you don't know as much as people who live there. If you think you do, you're actually delusional. We've learned that if you find really quality partners, people who've been successful, people who are smart, people who are straightforward, and people who have a need to do a certain type of investment, then being partners with them is the way to go. There are certain things that we know how to do really well, which is build electric plants. But in terms of dealing with Africa, we've been very successful, but that's because we also have picked good partners. And so this is a unique opportunity for us to be in business with somebody of Alico's standing, knowledge, and success, and commercial orientation. And in the electric area, he's going to need more electricity to expand around the continent. And because the continent is hugely underserved in electricity, his businesses will be able to grow faster and provide services and products for people around Africa if he's able to access electricity. So that's one of the reasons why he's in this venture. We're in it because we think that he can be a good partner. He'll use some of the electricity, we'll sell some to other people, and we'll increase the growth rate of almost every place where we operate. And that's an important thing as well for the continent.
I wonder what sectors you're interested in, Steve Schwartzman, because you mentioned the fact that Blackstone are involved in the oil in Ghana. And, you know, we are beginning to be told a lot by African leaders that they don't want to rely on the old model of investment in the extractive industries, oil and gas and so on, and that they want to build up their manufacturing base, because we know in a lot of countries the manufacturing accounts for very little of GDP. Even Nigeria, which is trying, it's only about 7% of GDP comes from manufacturing. So that's what we hear, but what actually happens in reality? Because, you know, Ghana discovers oil and they want people to come in on that. Mozambique discovers natural gas. Uganda discovers oil. How far is that old traditional model of investment in extractive industries being turned on its head, and how far is it actually below, you know, the rhetoric, business as usual?
I think this type of economic model is evolving. I look at the United States, where I'm from. We have a significant number of extractive industries, and we have manufacturing industries, and we have services. You have to start someplace. And if extractive industries are where you start, that doesn't mean that's where you finish. You can't build a manufacturing base if you don't have electricity to power equipment. You need an educational system as well that can train people. I'd encourage any of the countries that are here to look at the German model of education, because what they do for people who are not on a university track, they have a very in-depth training model for technically training their population. They work in combination with the government and the business community to define what the needs are for the business community, and then they take several years to actually instruct and give practical experience to people in their society. So they have a ready, high-quality workforce, which enables Germany as perhaps the highest cost labor in the world to have one of the greatest export manufacturing businesses. Now, they have great engineering skills, but a country can adapt these types of policies, but you have to have power, you have to have wealth. If the extractive industries can provide that wealth, that has to be recycled because ultimately, once you fully extract, you have nothing left. And if you have skills, if you've set up sovereign wealth funds to invest that money, if you train, if you establish manufacturing and exports, Africa has low-cost labor. If you look at the amazing successes of countries like China, Southeast Asia, certain parts of Latin America using low-cost labor combined with manufacturing skills,
Sure.
it's led to enormous increases in the creation of a middle class. And that is possible. That's the objective.
Okay. Well, I mean, as you say, if I can just bring two things that you've said together, we know that there is a large and ever-growing both consumer and labour force in Africa, and if they have the education and skills that you've just described that equip them to take on the jobs that the light manufacturing, hopefully expanding light manufacturing and heavier manufacturing sector can bring, is that another area that Blackstone, for instance, and other big investors might be interested in to go into manufacturing? We know that, for instance, Nissan is thinking of developing a car assembly plant in Nigeria, Honda in Tanzania, that kind of thing. Is that something that you'd also look at, the manufacturing area?
Well, you know, it's an interesting thing when you're in the investment business. You don't always know where the next really interesting investment opportunity is. What's most important is that you keep your eyes open and you see what's happening around you. So, for example, if you saw those trends actually occurring, we could be quite interested in doing something of that type. If, on the other hand, it's just sort of an idea with no support for it, then we probably wouldn't. So if you look at the evolutions of the economies of different countries and you start seeing manufacturing taking root and you start seeing people getting trained, then yes, we would be involved.
Could Africa become the new China of the world?
Well, that's a
in terms
complicated,
of manufacturing, I mean, become
complicated
the factory
answer.
of the world.
I can't quite see Africa becoming China.
Becoming the factory of the world is what I
I may
meant.
be not having enough vision on that one, but it's a whole different governance systems and educational systems and political systems and background and mercantile economy and these are different kinds of systems. I think they have to take their own evolutionary course.
It's just manufacturing just does seem like it because, as we know, I think it's something like 60% of African GDP is from the consumer.
Right.
High, a little bit
It's
like
high.
The United States. In terms of where the investment comes from, I know your home country, the United States, we've seen recently in August, of course, President Obama, a son of an African father, very much saying he sees Africa as the new frontier market. Some will have to say to him, actually, Mr. Obama, you're slightly late jumping on this bandwagon. I always love that figure from the Financial Times that China has 150 commercial attaches in sub-Saharan Africa. The United States has 8. So, never mind about that. But do you see now that American investment is becoming more interested in going into Africa? Because Susan Rice, National Security Advisor, said, look, we no longer see Africa as one long extractive pipeline, nor do we see it as a charity case, and that we want to bring more American investment into the continent. Do you see it coming?
Well, I think a lot of companies, American companies, have been in Africa for a long time, whether they're the General Motors, the Caterpillars, company like Blackstone has been here for 10 years. But I think you're fundamentally right that there's been more of a wake-up call that indeed China has been very active. They have more of a focused top-down strategic planning model for their economy, and they've targeted Africa because in large part they need those extractive industries given the growth of China and its economy. I think the U.S. is relatively late, but I've also learned in life that that necessarily being first isn't always necessary for success. And I think the leaders in Africa are doing a good job getting their message out that this is a high growth area of the world with a lot of young people who want to work, a lot of resources, and people are starting to make money. And that will attract more people. Frankly, what President Obama did with the U.S.-African Summit was a really good thing. And there were 33 African presidents. The summit went on for a few days. It was a highly atypical thing for America to do. And at the end of it, everybody who attended learned something, made more relationships with more potential, and it really was a terrific kickstart for the relationship between the continent.
He had his Power Africa initiative whereby he'd bring in, I think it was $14 billion from American investment corporations and also to leverage more. But as part of those Africa discussions in Washington, you know, the Nigerian entrepreneur, banker, and philanthropist, Tony Elumelu, has this idea that he describes as Afri-capitalism, whereby, you know, you bring capitalist and business-led initiatives, but they have to have some kind of development value to them, this kind of, you know, energy and that kind of thing. Do you see that kind of idea as one really taking root, that it isn't just normal investment when it comes to Africa, because after all, this has been a part of the world which really forms a disproportionate number of the world's less developed?
Well, I think that people recognize that, but they're looking for a path. They're looking for help in terms of what type of things they should be investing in, what the probability of success is. This needs, you know, government support. It needs clear rules, regulations, laws, and customs. There's a lot that the African countries can do to encourage this type of investment. If they do, the money will show up because the kind of growth rates are really getting people's attention. But nobody wants to be in a situation where they don't feel as secure as they should be. And to the extent that the governments of Africa can provide that kind of infrastructure, I guess you'd call that soft infrastructure as opposed to just built infrastructure, you'll attract a lot of capital.
We're talking about big projects. Obviously, I started off by asking you about the Bujagali Dam and now this infrastructural project alliance that you have with Dangote. But I just wonder whether you have any views on where the investment is going, because we know that it's the SMEs, the small and medium enterprises, which actually provide most of the employment in African countries, whatever kind of business it is, and that increasingly they find it very hard to get finance, to get lending. And, you know, you get the big guns coming in and they want the big eye-catching projects, you know, like Bujagali and so on. Can you see any of that FDI that's coming in going to the SMEs?
Well, part of that is just access to a banking system. Usually, when you go into the developing world, the easiest thing to invest in are banks because you catch the growth rate from everywhere. You don't have to make choices. And so I think to the extent that countries facilitate that type of investment, you'll see that more capital will be there. You know, the G20 is making infrastructure one of their 4 major priorities for the next year. And there's going to be more money flowing from the developed world generally to infrastructure of all type. And as that develops, and as the banking system matures, there'll be more money available for the expansion of those small and medium-sized industries. There's also a banking crisis worldwide. Do not forget that the Basel III rules are basically shrinking banking systems all over the world, which is one reason, actually, why you have a Europe that isn't growing. You have slower growth rates in many, many places because when you shrink the banking system, globally, there's no capital to grow. That's a temporary phenomenon that the system is working its way through, and as more capital is raised and those rules are either satisfied or modified in some way, there'll be more capital generally for economic growth and also for Africa.
As I said, one of the world's leading investors, when you decide to go into a country, do you share with us what you think are, important factors? I mean, do you need strong macroeconomic fundamentals like, a stable currency, inflation that's not rampant, that's in single digit, and that kind of thing? What do you look for?
Well, going into a country is a bit of an act of faith. You have to believe that they have laws. You have to believe that they enforce those laws. You have to believe that they treat you, in effect, as an empowered person, and they're not going to take your money away. You have to believe, particularly if you're from countries that have foreign corrupt practices acts like the United States, Great Britain, and other countries that are domiciled there, that you can do business without corruption. These are sort of basic types of things that you need, because otherwise it's too high risk, and those are factors that can be achieved, but they can't be achieved by outsiders like ourselves. They have to be bought into by the indigenous countries. You look at education levels, you look at the desire to work. Certain countries have people who are there who really want to work hard, do well, and some countries don't. You want to be in the places where people want to succeed. If you have those criteria and sort of generally good management of a country, you will go there. If you don't have good leadership, and this applies not just to Africa, this is a broader concept around the world because we invest globally. When you have terrific political leadership, it's very easy to attract money. When you don't, things tend to go wrong and you get caught up with it. And so we're very sensitive to reforms, to debottleneck things and put good practices into effect. And so it's not a simple thing. And it's also helpful if there's a culture of people making money. In other words, some places making money isn't something anybody cares about. Well, in those types of environments, that's normally contagious. And we try not to go there. When people want to be successful, and the people in that country want to be successful, then we're joining an environment where our chance of being successful is pretty high too.
And in our final minute, so we know capital is usually a coward. It will go to where it feels safest, to fellow investors out there, wherever they may be, because we know that FDI is really increasing in Africa. I think the African Development Bank says by the end of this year it's going to be 80 billion.
Right.
Last year it was 43 billion. So although it's still a small proportion, about 5% of global FDI goes to Africa, the rise is quite exponential.
Right.
So, final message, don't be scared off Africa.
Well, don't be scared because it's happening. Look, there are some great African entrepreneurs who were at this conference. There are people who started with absolutely nothing, who've made huge successes, not just of themselves and their own financial self-interest, but with employment, raising the level of living in their countries. And there are a lot of stars here who have mastered this system. And I think the future is a very good one for Africa. I think there are things that have to be done to get individual countries in better shape. If you can do that, the foreign direct investment, the money will come, the capital will come, and the expertise from outside will come in a really nice partnership.
Steve Schwartzman, thank you very much. So the future for Africa, the future is as orange as the African sun. Thank you very much indeed, Steve. Thank you. Thank you very much.